Imagine this. You're driving home after a long day. The road is calm, the music is low, and you're just thinking about getting back to your house. You know you haven't broken any traffic laws. You weren't speeding, you didn't run a red light, and you weren't weaving through traffic. Everything is normal, until suddenly you see flashing red and blue lights in your rearview mirror. Your first thought is probably simple. It's just a routine traffic stop. Maybe the officer wants to check something quickly. You pull over calmly, roll down the window, and wait. But instead of asking for your license and registration, the officer walks up and says something completely unexpected. Step out of the vehicle. You're under arrest. Confused, you ask what this is about. The officer tells you that you're suspected of being connected to a crime that happened several towns away, a crime you've never even heard of. You're shocked. You know you had nothing to do with it, so how could something like this happen? The answer might surprise you, because somewhere in the background, an artificial intelligence system analyzed enormous amounts of data, movement patterns, digital traces, and behavior signals, and decided that you matched a pattern of life connected to an investigation. And the scariest part? You probably didn't even know that system existed. Before you say, well, I'm not doing anything wrong, so I don't have anything to worry about, hold that thought for a second. We're going to come back to that idea later, because that belief might be one of the biggest misunderstandings about privacy and surveillance today. Now think about this for a moment. If a government agency had the power to press a single button and instantly map out your entire life, where you travel, who you spend time with, what you search for online, and what apps you use, do you really think they would choose not to use that capability? Because recently, something very revealing happened that gives us a glimpse into how close we might already be to that reality. Just last week, a major artificial intelligence company had serious discussions with the U.S. Department of Defense about using advanced AI systems for national security purposes. But during those discussions, the company set two very clear boundaries. First, they said their technology could not be used for mass surveillance of citizens inside the country. Second, they said it could not be used to create fully autonomous weapons systems that operate without human control. Those were their red lines. But the government's response raised some serious concerns. Officials insisted that if they were going to use the technology, they needed the authority to deploy it for what they called any lawful purpose. At first glance, those words might sound harmless. After all, if something is lawful, what's the problem? But in legal language, those three words, any lawful purpose, can carry enormous implications. Because what they really mean is this: if there is any way to argue that a use could be legal, then the government wants the option to do it. And that's exactly why the company pushed back. Their position was simple. They argued that the law has not yet caught up with the capabilities of modern artificial intelligence. The technology is advancing much faster than the rules that govern it. So instead of vague promises and flexible interpretations, they wanted clear limits written directly into the contract. In other words, they said something that lawyers often repeat in high-stakes negotiations. If the limits are real, then put them in writing. But those limits were never agreed to. And not long after that disagreement, the government began moving away from that company and looking for other partners willing to work under broader terms. Soon afterward, another major AI developer stepped in and secured a government contract reportedly worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, the company involved says it also has guidelines and ethical guardrails in place. But the bigger issue here isn't really about competition between tech companies. The real story is about a much larger battle over what governments should be allowed to do with artificial intelligence in the years ahead. Because the capabilities of modern AI go far beyond simple automation. When combined with massive amounts of data, AI can identify patterns, relationships, and behaviors that humans could never detect on their own. And that brings us to one of the most important surveillance loopholes that exists today. Most people assume the government needs a warrant to collect detailed information about their personal lives. But that assumption isn't always accurate. In many cases, agencies don't need to collect the data themselves at all. They can simply buy it. Every day, millions of smartphone apps gather information about users, location data, browsing habits, app activity, and much more. That information is often sold to data brokers, companies that specialize in collecting and packaging large datasets. Those datasets are then sold on the open market. And in some cases, government agencies have purchased that information using public funds. Think about that for a moment. Data that was originally gathered by apps on your phone, apps you downloaded voluntarily, can eventually end up in large commercial databases, and those databases can be accessed by organizations that never needed a warrant to begin with. Even when the information is technically anonymous, modern artificial intelligence can often analyze patterns and re-identify individuals with surprising accuracy. When you combine location history, device identifiers, and behavioral patterns, it becomes possible to reconstruct a detailed picture of someone's daily life, where they work, where they sleep, which places they visit regularly, how often they go there, and who else appears in those same locations. In other words, a complete pattern of life. Government documents and investigations have already revealed concerns about this practice. Some lawmakers have warned that purchasing commercially available data could allow agencies to bypass constitutional protections that were designed to protect citizens from unreasonable searches. And the risks don't stop there. Location data alone can reveal extremely sensitive details about people's lives, visits to medical facilities, religious institutions, shelters, or private meetings. It can reveal personal routines, relationships, and habits that most people would never expect to become part of a government database. This is why the idea that I'm not doing anything wrong, so I don't need privacy, can be misleading. Privacy isn't just about hiding wrongdoing, it's about maintaining the basic boundaries that protect freedom in everyday life. Without those boundaries, the amount of information that can be collected, analyzed, and interpreted grows almost limitless. To understand where this could lead, it helps to look at how some surveillance technologies already operate today. There are tools that allow investigators to analyze hundreds of billions of location records gathered from millions of devices. With enough data, artificial intelligence can group those records into patterns that reveal routines, travel habits, and social connections. Investigators call this building a pattern of life. It means that instead of looking at a single moment, analysts examine long-term behavior patterns to understand how someone lives, moves, and interacts with others. Another technology that is rapidly expanding is facial recognition. Law enforcement agencies across the world have experimented with systems that can scan images and attempt to match them against large databases of faces. But even government studies have acknowledged that these systems are not perfect. Accuracy can vary depending on lighting, image quality, and demographic factors. That means mistakes can happen, and when mistakes happen in the context of law enforcement, the consequences can be serious. There have already been documented cases in which individuals were wrongly arrested after an algorithm incorrectly identified them as a match. What's important to understand is that surveillance technology doesn't have to be flawless to have an impact. It only needs to generate enough confidence for investigators to pursue a lead. That lead can trigger questioning, searches, or even arrests while authorities try to confirm or disprove the system's conclusions. There are also investigative techniques known as geofence warrants. Instead of targeting a specific suspect, a geofence warrant asks technology companies to provide information about every device that was present in a certain area at a specific time. Imagine investigators asking for a list of every smartphone that was near a particular building during a certain hour. Anyone who happened to be nearby, even by coincidence, could appear in the results. Another emerging method involves what are sometimes called reverse keyword searches. In those cases, investigators ask search engines to provide accounts associated with specific search terms. For example, authorities might request a list of users who searched for a particular phrase during a certain time frame. Both of these techniques raise complex legal questions, and courts are still debating how they should be handled under constitutional protections. But there is another factor that makes these practices even more powerful than they used to be. Artificial intelligence dramatically reduces the cost and time required to analyze massive datasets. What once required teams of analysts working for weeks can now be processed in seconds by advanced algorithms. And when analysis becomes cheap and fast, large-scale searches become far more common. The result is a surveillance environment where broad data collection can become routine. But the implications of surveillance go beyond law enforcement investigations. Researchers have long studied what are known as chilling effects. When people believe they may be monitored, they sometimes change their behavior. They may avoid researching certain topics, attending certain meetings, or expressing controversial opinions because they worry that their activities could be recorded or misunderstood. History shows that privacy protections have often played an important role in preserving freedom of association, political organization, and open discussion. Without those protections, individuals may feel pressure to self-censor. And that's why debates about surveillance technology are not only about security, they are also about how societies balance safety with civil liberties. So what can ordinary people actually do in a world where data collection is so widespread? One practical step is reducing the amount of information that apps collect in the first place. Many smartphones allow users to control how frequently apps can access location data. Instead of allowing constant background tracking, it's often possible to set permissions so that location is only available while the app is actively being used or disabled entirely. Another useful habit is reviewing which apps truly need access to sensitive data. A flashlight application, for example, probably doesn't need to track your location. Neither does a simple coupon or shopping app. Limiting unnecessary permissions can significantly reduce the amount of information that enters commercial data marketplaces. It's also helpful to review device settings related to location history and activity tracking. Many services record past movements or search behavior by default, but those features can often be disabled or periodically cleared. Beyond individual actions, there is also an ongoing public conversation about how surveillance technology should be regulated. Some policymakers have proposed stricter rules governing when government agencies can purchase or access sensitive data, especially location information and browsing histories. Advocates for reform argue that access to that kind of data should require the same level of oversight as traditional search warrants. Transparency is another important element. Communities often learn about surveillance tools only after they have already been deployed by local agencies. Public awareness and open discussions can help ensure that new technologies are evaluated carefully before they become widespread. Finally, if someone ever finds themselves interacting with law enforcement during an investigation, it's important to understand basic legal rights. In many legal systems, individuals have the right to remain silent and to request legal counsel before answering questions. Understanding those rights can help ensure that people navigate serious situations with the proper guidance. As artificial intelligence continues to evolve, the debate about surveillance will likely become one of the defining technology conversations of the next decade. Governments see powerful new tools that could help identify threats and solve crimes. Technology companies see massive opportunities to develop advanced systems and secure lucrative contracts, and the public often finds itself caught in the middle, trying to understand how these developments might affect everyday life. The real challenge is finding a balance where innovation and security do not come at the cost of fundamental freedoms, because once surveillance infrastructure becomes deeply embedded in society, it can be extremely difficult to reverse. If you made it this far into the video, I'm really curious what you think about all of this. Do you believe these technologies are necessary for safety in a modern world, or do you think stronger limits are needed to protect privacy and civil liberties? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is an important part of this conversation, and if you enjoy breaking down complex legal and technology issues like this in a clear and practical way, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.